My name is Jonathan Gilliam, and this is The Experts. Well, hello everybody. I'm chewing ice as I start the show. So, interesting yesterday, the show that I had yesterday, and talking about the demonic influence. I said I would come back on here and discuss that a little bit more with today's podcast after airing the speech that I gave on Saturday at New York's Rally for Life up in Albany. Incredible group of people. And if you didn't get to hear the speech, make sure that you go and listen to yesterday's show. It's the last 11 minutes in the show. I think you'll like the whole show, but it's definitely the last 11 minutes, and you'll be able to hear that speech. One of the things that I said yesterday as I approached the stage, I had planned on talking about something completely different. I was going to talk about how we need to start rallying around freedom and the Constitution, and not just around back to blue or just around President Trump. My take on this is that the war on the police and the leftist actions against the president would actually be better served as far as fighting against those things, and stopping the war on police and standing up for Trump and getting more people motivated about Trump if we just started tackling the bottom line, which is the war on the Constitution and the war on freedom and the leftist attempt. And when I say leftist, I'm saying globalist, Marxist, communist, socialist, all these different individuals, atheists, these fake big money, or no, they're not fake, but the big money donors that you would think would be conservatives, the fake news media, all these individuals are all lumped into that one big giant group that is acting out against freedom and the Constitution. And as I said yesterday, I've said before, they think that they stand for free speech, but they don't stand for free speech or any speech that doesn't align with what they think is right, which is not actually free speech. So when I walked up, that's what I was initially going to talk about. But when I got up there and as I approached the podium, God shifted my focus onto this group of Antifa / Black Lives Matter. They all had shirts on it. A lot of them had shirts on that identified who they were. There wasn't any difference in the group. They were one and the same. And law enforcement, by the way, was not down there. They were right up on the hill, checking their phones, doing nothing to keep this group from integrating themselves at the front and basically disrupting and intimidating the rest of the people that were there to praise the Constitution and freedom and stand up for freedom and condemn this murderous governor in New York. So I kept focusing on this group and what I've been doing research on demonic possession or influence, and I'd seen this stuff before years ago, and recently listened to a video that was, and I need to quit saying I'll listen to this video and not naming the guy. I would love to have this guy on eventually. I got to look up the video, but talking about demonic influence and the characteristics of these individuals and the characteristics of people that have been influenced by demonic possession. And the more I dug into this, the more I saw that their actions, their behaviors, the uncontrollable screams and yells and the uncontrollable anger, the violent actions that they take, all these things pointed back to or pointed towards the same exact actions that I'm seeing within all these different protests. And here it is. Let me pull this up. This is I don't want to play it, but let me see here. It is Spiritual Warfare Part 4 with Dr. Carl Payne, Payne. That was the video that I'm watching. I would advise that you go and watch that video. A lot of what I'm saying is going to make a lot more sense. And I am very, I don't want to say I'm critical of Dr. Payne. I mean, I think his information that he put out is spectacular. It's just very dry. So it's kind of difficult to get through. It's, he's not trying to impress anybody for sure. It was a little dry for me to get through, but I finally got through it. As I got up there, and my test was going to be to call out Satan, call out the demons, and see exactly what happened, and really not even try to hide that I'm talking directly to these individuals that were there. And sure enough, it worked. I mean, that by the time I got through with my speech, and then the next speaker that came up there was about 2 speakers after that, the whole mood just changed. You could literally feel the change of these individuals, and they became almost to a point where you could just see in their eyes they're not really there. And we see this a lot. We see this when you look at the rioters, when you see the different protesters, especially people who are protesting pro-choice against abortion, and who stand up for murderous governors like Cuomo, when they say that you can actually have a baby, set it to the side, and then decide if you want it or not, as though it's a cucumber or a piece of beef that is on your plate that somebody has just served you. And you decide, no, I'm more in the mood of broccoli and fish today. I mean, that's basically the extent of which they treat life. I mean, Cuomo, this guy is probably, I think, in this country right now, probably one of the most psychopathic, narcissistic murderers that there has been in recent history. And I think it's clear that in his book campaign, where he's going around on television, all these different shows are having him on there, and they're just celebrating this guy. He just wrote a book. I'm sure he wrote it himself. Wink, wink. But it is celebrating, the book is celebrating his triumphs in the COVID, in how he's faced COVID and how New York has handled this, when in fact the COVID crisis is not over. People are still dying from this. The fact that it's not as deadly as they've made it out to be. So yes, there are people dying, but not as deadly as they've made it out to be. And they've done nothing to protect elderly people who are the most at risk. In fact, he did the opposite. So did many of these governors around the country by putting COVID positive patients into these elderly clinics. And in New York City, he had a Navy ship here, didn't put anybody on that. He had the Jacob Javits Center, didn't put anybody in that. Had another hospital they spent over $20 million building out on Long Island, didn't put a single person in that. Instead, they shoveled all these people, COVID positive patients, into these elderly, quote unquote, rehab clinics, which that's kind of a stretch. Basically, the majority of people that work there are educated in medicine about as much as somebody who flips a burger at McDonald's. But here's something that jumped out at me. Just a side note. Okay, I was discussing this today. I've heard from several different people that their elderly parents or grandparents that are in these clinics are complaining because they didn't get a ballot, and when they invest, for voting, because these people can't go to the polls. And as it turns out, what's happening in these elderly clinics is that the clinics themselves are taking these ballots, filling them out, and sending them back. They're not telling the person that's in there. They're not contacting the family members and having them come down and do it. They're just simply filling them out and sending them in. That's called ballot harvesting. And when you think about it and you look at Cuomo and a lot of these other governors, they are not allowing the families to come and see their family members when they could set up a clean room where people can, there's ways to do this. There's ways to visit these people, but they're not allowing it at all. Now it kind of makes sense when you think about how they're doing this stuff and how they are ballot harvesting. Now, if I just said that and it had no evidence of anything else that they had done, well, then you could criticize me. But you can't criticize me because it's not like conspiracy theories that were, 5 years ago, you would say, man, that person's crazy. Now, I mean, we've seen the fall of the United States government, the most powerful government in the history of mankind. We've seen it crumble around the president because of the leftists. Everything that they touch, it dies. 17 or 18 of the most violent cities in the United States are ran by Democrat mayors in most of the time in Democrat-led states. And the other 2 or 3 that I can't remember if it was 17 or 18 that were Democrat ran, I think it was either 1 or 2 independent mayors and 1 Republican mayor who's probably a rhino if we looked it up. But when you look at this demonic influence that I believe is out there and the rank structure and the way when you research, and if you watch that video that I just told you about, you will hear people who've worked around individuals who have been demon possessed or I always say influence because I'm not real quite sure that they can actually be in you or around you, but there is a hierarchy there. And these are not Freddy Krueger type of evil things that look like a troll. These are, from what I've gathered and what research I've done and people who've had these. Now, I'm not talking about joking like, Discovery Channel experiences. I'm talking about real people who have dealt with this and seen this over and over and over again. People who cannot control their actions because they have allowed the influence to take over them. Similar to a commercial, when you see commercials enough, you think, or peer pressure, you think, well, I've got to get those pants. I mean, who in their right mind decided that mom pants should be back in fashion, but people wear them because that's in fashion, and the pressure, this is what you should wear. Women end up wearing those. They look awful. I'm trying to use regular people terms here. So, but this influence exists and it overwhelms people, and their actions are very uniformed. They seem chaotic, but they're very uniformed in the fact that this is what somebody who is possessed or influenced will act like. And these demons and Satan himself, they are narcissists. They believe themselves to be aristocratic. They are very deviant and very similar to the left in that when confronted, they get very nasty. They don't try to explain how they feel. They don't try to win you over because they believe wholeheartedly in what they're saying. They just become very nasty because they're not that bright. And in the case of the left and the people that are influenced by these demonic creatures, I'm not saying that some of those people are very, very educated, the human beings that are being influenced are very educated. But once you allow that into you or around you, your level of wisdom decreases dramatically. And you, as we have seen, those types of people, those people who are influenced by demonic entities, become very shallow, nasty, mean, and vindictive, and very intimidating. They try their hardest to intimidate those who have a different belief system or an idea than they do. So one of the things I saw as this group started to get riled up is the uniformity of their chaotic actions. The yelling increased amongst all of them. The sporadic movement of these people. There were several of them that were, and again, it was coordinated. I'm watching this from afar, looking at this, and a couple of them were like the busy bees. They were running around screaming. They got louder. They were getting in people's faces. Then the rest of them would start to push. If somebody would say something back to them, then they would kind of try to surround that individual. It was very uniform, but it was chaotic at the same time. Their actions are chaotic, but it's uniformed chaos. And it was a very interesting opportunity to call this out straight to this group and watch the actions. Watch the uniformity of the chaos blossom like an ugly black demonic flower. So after I got through doing this and it was all over with and I got back and I wanted to share the speech with you yesterday. Again, it was the last 11 minutes of yesterday's show. I want to challenge you that when you get the opportunity to call this out, that you will not be afraid, that you will call them out, or that you'll just simply start talking about demonic influence and the characteristics of the controlled chaos and how people act. And this is what I did. I just talked about how Portland and Wisconsin and Rochester, New York and Atlanta and how all these rioters act is uniformed. And then how the people who are in media and their leftist censorship of free speech, which is what social media and mainstream media and the truth, censorship to the truth, is demonic. And you call that out. And the people that are in government that absolutely do everything they can to go against freedom and the Constitution, call it out as demonic and watch how they react. At first, they're totally confused, I believe, because they're not used to being called out. Remember, you got to think of these demonic entities as narcissists, right? They believe that they are better than you, but deep down inside in their heart, well, I don't know if they have hearts, but deep down inside, they know that they are cursed. They are cursed by God himself. And so they are not used to being called out. And they, at first, will be a little confused, but then they'll react. And I challenge you to, if anything, just bring it up. Bring it up and talk about the uniformity of this chaos and say it. Demonic influence. Some of these people are demonically possessed. And Satan is the father of all lies. He's a narcissist. And these are aristocratic entities that are posing in a way to bring intimidation and fear, and they're posing as individuals who have a reason to be angry, as individuals who have a purpose in the filth that they spew and the disruption and the intimidation that they're pushing out. It's a complete fraud, and when you call it out, it really, really does have an impact, and I think you will see it. I'm pretty sure that if you do this in the right circumstances, as I described it yesterday, if you've ever seen where they take a speaker and set it on its side and they put sand or ball bearings or something on top of it, and as they crank it up, it starts to become jittery and bounce all over the place. That or water is the same way. That is what happens. It is uniformed chaos, and it gets a little bit uncontrollable when you challenge them. It's interesting to watch. But be careful, because this stuff is real. This stuff is very real. Now, the other thing I wanted to bring up, and then I want to just touch a little bit on Amy Coney Barrett. Why is that so hard for me to say? Why do I want to say Amy Coney Barrett? I don't know why, but Amy Coney Barrett. I'll touch on that in a second. But the other thing I just want to talk about, the reality of life and death and how serious this is. Right. And when I talk about things like demonic influence or your relationship with God, understanding of, people who put down the story of Jesus, or they say, I had a discussion with somebody one time, it just spun my entire head. They said, I don't believe this nonsense from this book. That they don't realize, first of all, they didn't realize that the Bible is actually many books that are put together. And I don't understand how anybody could believe this nonsense about some guy that God, inseminated this woman and created a boy who became a man, and he was the Messiah. I mean, how can you believe that stuff? And I said, well, what do you believe? Well, I believe, this is what this person said. She said, I believe that aliens came here and they're the ones who populated the earth. And that's what I believe. I said, where do you get that idea from? Well, I've heard scientists talk, and this, they have nothing. There is nothing there. The interesting thing about Jesus and about God, the real God, and about America and the Constitution, these things are they go hand in hand. First and foremost, it's very serious business. This whole thing about my religion, I don't know where the word religion actually started in history, but when we attach the word religion, it becomes uncomfortable. It becomes almost like something that is boring and you don't want any part of, because it's a controlling idea. But nothing could be more from the truth when it comes to the true God, Jesus, America, and the Constitution. Freedom is really the thread that sews all those things together. The way I have understood as I've studied the Bible, and I've studied other religions too. I was actually, when I went to college, was going to major in philosophy, philosophy and religions. I soon found out that philosophy in the university system is really just critical thinking, and it got very boring very quickly, because critical thinking to me is like math with words, and I don't like math, and I don't like to have an argument with somebody to win the argument. I like to have, if somebody wants to debate me on the truth and I know the truth, I'm not going to lose that argument. Now, it may not convince them one way or the other, but I know the truth exists, and this is the truth, and I present it, and it is what it is. So anyway, I ended up majoring in psychology and political science with a double major. And that actually helped me tremendously throughout life, understanding people and the political. Anywhere you work is going to be a political environment. In the world that we live in, as you see now, is being destroyed by politics. And psychology is being used all the time. So it was very fascinating for me. But one thing I definitely realized is that freedom, this thing that permeates and is like a thread that goes through God, the true God, Jesus, the story of Jesus, the United States, and the Constitution, the thing that threads all those together is the idea of freedom. The interesting thing about Jesus is that his story is all about you being free to choose him, you being free to choose God and to understand God through that sacrifice. Before that, in every religion, other than Christianity, it is all about works and about physical sacrifice in some way, shape, or form to prove that you are worthy by doing this list of things on a daily, monthly, or whatever basis. True Christianity preaches solely this: that work was done by this man who was the Son of God. And if you believe in that work, then your sins will be paid for. You don't have to do the works. That work was done. And that he is going to be the interceding entity between you and God, and will stand in front of the judgment throne and say, I paid the price. This person is clean. Now, sounds like religion, like every other religion, but here's the difference. First and foremost, it's very serious. It's not about God or this individual or a religion controlling you. It's about you not being controlled and making a choice free of any pressure or will from God himself. It's your choice. Believe in that sacrifice, and then you are able to have that sacrifice atone for your sins. It's simply a belief of faith. But the basis of the whole thing is freedom. You want to choose it, you choose it. You don't want to choose it, you don't have to. That's what's the amazing thing about it. And I liken this to when I went into the military or when I went into law enforcement and I volunteered to do these jobs. Yes, I got paid for them, but it wasn't as though I was forced to serve in the military. It wasn't as though I was forced to be in law enforcement. I did those of my own free will, and I did them for the right reasons because I wanted to serve my nation. I wanted to serve my fellow American. I wanted to ensure freedom so that they would not, and I don't even think I understood the reality of what this is all about until I was in there and and was sacrificing. That similar to Jesus and the relationship with God and your ability to choose that sacrifice, to believe in that, the Constitution and the United States are the same way. Just like when I went in the military and I was free to make that choice. You are free to make a choice in your life in this country because of the Constitution, because you live in America, where the foundation is freedom. And it's freedom based on certain inalienable rights that we all have. Now, we have those rights. God wants us to have those rights, but in certain countries or under certain governors or mayors, as we see now, those rights, and heaven forbid a president that doesn't understand these rights gets into office. I believe that President Trump does. You will be a completely different place. See, the thing about your relationship with Jesus and God is that is a decision that's in your heart. Nobody can stop that. No matter how bad the circumstance, you can make that decision in your heart. No one can take that away. No one can change what is going on inside of your mind and your heart. They can't. Freedom, as far as the United States goes, can be changed. It can be altered. But just like with Jesus and God, it's important for you to be able to be free to choose him. It's important for you in the United States to be free so that you can choose to continue to sustain freedom. That's a cyclical thing. A man that is not free and is made to defend their government, I guess you could say, or whatever country that they live in, they'll never fully defend it. They're enslaved. And that's one of the things about the United States of why our military is so great, why they're so powerful, because it is full of free people who chose. Now, I think there should be, honestly now, I think that there should be we should make the differentiation between ground combat units and the rest of the military, not putting down people's service in the military. But I believe that there should be mandatory service in this country for 2 years. And but ground combat should be that type of a unit, any type of, not just ground combat, but flying, helicopters, whatever, that should be voluntary. But I do believe service in the military should be mandatory for everyone. Now, what we would see then is what we see in Israel, which is a very deep understanding of the world that they live in and how important their involvement is for the sustainment of their country. So I hope I made that clear, because this is very, very important stuff. Life and death is very important. Everyone is born, and we're born into a world that we really know nothing about when we get here. And almost 100% of the people, when you die, you were not prepared for it. And my goal in today's show is to make sure that I at least plant a seed in there so that you can start preparing yourself for the inevitable death that you will face. It is a serious circumstance, and it is imperative in this nation and for the rest of the world that we sustain our freedom, because if we lose freedom here, the rest of the world changes potentially forever. The United States did not just come about on a whim. It's not like they talk about evolution where it just happens, right? Which I don't really believe in evolution either, but I guess you could say there is certain types of evolution that can occur, but not to the point where science has bastardized that we came from monkeys or whatever. I don't believe in any of that stuff, and I don't think science knows even a 1% of what they think that they know. I think that there's things that we will never know in this nation. in this world that scientists tell us is a fact. It's only a fact as long as they can keep somebody else from proving that it's not a fact. That's the way science works. Science does a lot of amazing things, but in the reality, as I've told this story before, if I marched you into the water and held you underwater, you instinctually will fight for air. If I take you into the desert and march you through the hot desert, and trust me, I just got out of Arizona, I know exactly what this is all about, you will long and fight for water. And if I starve you, you will long and fight for food. Instinctually, it's what you do. I've seen people die. I've been with people when they die. I've been with loved ones when other people are dying. They don't call out for science. They call out for God, because instinctually they know God is the one true answer. So when we look at science and we look at all these different things that people talk about, people get wrapped up in all this stuff, or politics and this and that, they lose sight of the fact that you are going to die, and that if we all concentrated on preparing ourselves for that and trying not only to understand it, but to prepare ourselves for it. And the way you prepare yourself for it is you seek out truth. And once you understand the reality that this life will end, you will start looking at what happens next very seriously. You'll start taking it very seriously. And you will find that there is a lot of stuff out there called religions that, although they say this is the truth about what will happen after you die, their whole focus is on control of you while you're here, not preparing you for what comes next. There's only one religion that does that, and that's Christianity. And this is very serious. I don't even like using the word religion, because the truth is, in my mind, Christianity is the truth. It's not a religion, and it is the least work. In fact, there is no work. Once you become a Christian and you believe in that sacrifice, you long to work. You long to do these things, but it is not a requirement. But your life will change. You will become a better person. And that is directly linked to the United States and to the Constitution. Again, the bottom line for all of this is that you remain free. Now, do I think the United States should be a Christian nation and force all the religions out? No. I believe that is part of the whole freedom aspect. You believe what you want to believe. This whole testimony that I've given throughout this podcast is my testimony. But I'm free to give that in this nation. But I'm not telling you have to be this way. I hope you understand what I'm saying. I hope it motivates you to seek out Christ and to understand what true Christianity is all about. But it's your choice. That freedom of choice is of the utmost importance. And we are losing track of that. On the left, on the right, we get milked into these, we got to stand for this, or we have to stand for that, or let's go out and make sure that we intimidate this group or that group, and we've lost track of the reality of what morals and ethics are and why they are. You should be motivated to be moral and ethical. You should be motivated to be good to other people. You should be motivated to be ferocious in the fight for freedom. But most people don't understand the reality of what freedom is all about. They don't understand that you can't choose a religion if you don't have freedom. They don't understand that you will not enjoy life without freedom. They don't understand that having things promised to you or given to you is not freedom, that is a form of control and enslavement, because ultimately the slave master will stop giving you stuff for free. Ultimately. So again, one last time, this is serious business. Life and death is very serious. And it is not about a religion. It's about fact. And we lose sight of this in all these different things that we talk about, all these different things that we get upset about, all these different things that we surround ourselves with and that we must have, or that person that we must be with, or that we get lost in that. And I want this to be a wake-up call to you. All these things that you're seeing, that's why people don't look at the demonic influence and this type of stuff, because they think it's of a religious issue. We don't say demonic stuff that's of a religion. Just like I don't say communism. That's used to be. Well, that's not true about any of those. Communism is alive and well. It's just, they name it different things. Sometimes they call it progressive Democrats or Democratic progressive, whatever they want to call it. I mean, it comes under different names all the time. It's the same thing when it comes to demonic influence. People think that that's religion, that's religious, that's just some religious zealot saying that. It's not. It's truth. It's fact. There are entities that people don't even realize that are out there. And they will not stop for a moment, pause, look at reality, and see that it's there. Now, I'm going to milk this into it, the Amy Coney Barrett soundbite that I have. Out of all the stuff, I mean, her confirmation hearing, I mean, she's a beast. What can I say? She is not intimidated at all by these people. And I think that's great. I mean, I'll tell you, she was not my first pick. And some of her past decisions seem more globalist than they do constitutionalist. I hope that the person that she presented herself as is the reality of who she is, because she comes off as a very pleasant but very stern individual. And she is not. She did this entire confirmation hearing with no notes. I mean, she basically was going off of her knowledge and wisdom and experience. I thought she did an incredible job. Now, I'm going to play the soundbite. I am no fan of Ben Sass, or Sassy, however you say his name. I'm no fan of the way the Senate and the Congress have these hearings. If I ever decide to go into politics and I'm up there, it is going to, and I will make it known that these things make me extremely uncomfortable, because it is nothing more than banter and these political individuals getting up there so that they can use the sound bites as a way to get reelected. That's basically all this is. I mean, there are your ideological people that get up there and they hammer the person that's up there with their ideology. But again, it's just grandstanding by the senators or the congressmen and congresswomen. If I was up there, I just couldn't do it. I would literally be cross-examining this individual is to the extent that I could if I was in one of these types of hearings. But in this case, when Ben Sassy asks her about the First Amendment, he's getting to a point, or he's getting at a point with her. But I was shocked when I listened to this soundbite, because they both miss the entire point of the First Amendment. And we're talking about a sitting United States senator who basically, if you look at Ben Sassy's resume, he's got zero experience outside of the Senate and two jobs. So it doesn't surprise me that he missed it, but I was really surprised that she missed this whole question and the reality of. So I'm going to play part of the soundbite, most of it. Maybe I'll play all of it. And then I'm going to you'll see, if you've been listening to this show, the reality of what the First Amendment is all about. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and give it to you before I let you hear them. Everything that I've been talking about in today's show, including the demonic issue, is tied around your ability to be free and your ability to understand truth. If you are not free and you are controlled by a tyrant, you are not going to have freedom of speech. You're not going to have freedom of religion. You're not going to have freedom of the press. You're not, and by the freedom of the press, I mean dissemination of information. You are not going to have freedom of redress or protest, which is obviously a problem here when she's trying to answer that, and freedom of assembly, right? The reason, this is the true reason which they both miss, and you'll see in this, and it should make you cringe when you hear this, is that tyrants will immediately go after those things. Those are the basis of freedom from a tyrant. If a leader tells you you cannot assemble, there's an issue there. They are trying to control you. If a leader tells you that you cannot protest what I think or what I do or how I treat you, there is a tyrannical problem there. If they say to you, you cannot say whatever you want, I restrict you, they are controlling you. That is the growth of a tyrant. If they say that you cannot disseminate your information or how you feel, that is the way a tyrant will keep a group of free people from assembling to protest using their freedom of speech. See, all these things are intertwined together. And then lastly was the freedom of religion, which, as I've shown you today, the reality of religion, speech, protest, assembly, and ability to disseminate that information or press, all of those things are what tyrants go after in order to eliminate your freedom. Now, whether or not the founding fathers realized this or not, those 5 things are directly related to that thread of freedom that allows you to choose God, that allows you the ability to be free enough to look for the truth, that allows you the freedom to live in a country without fear. That is what the First Amendment is all about. That is why those 5 things were so important. Freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press or to disseminate that information, freedom of assembly, and freedom to protest. If you take those things away, you take away freedom. The foundation of freedom, which means you are not free to make the best of who you can be, and you're not free. Ultimately, what it boils down to, you're not free to know God. That is what the First Amendment is all about. But let's listen to these 2 people, a judge, a lifelong judge, who's now going to be appointed to the Supreme Court, and Ben Sasse, who's a sitting senator. Now, I will say this. No one else in there probably could have answered this either, because they don't get it. Most people don't get it. Hopefully after this episode, you will get it, the importance of freedom and what the First Amendment's all about. But let's listen to them.
What are the 5 freedoms of the First Amendment?
Speech, religion, press, assembly. Speech, press, religion, assembly. I don't know. What am I missing?
Redress or protest.
Okay.
Why is there one amendment that has these 5 freedoms clustered? Why do they hang together?
I don't know what you're getting at on that one. You mean like what is the common denominator?
Yeah, I mean, why I'm getting back to the same idea that the Bill of Rights was sort of an attempt to do public catechesis. It was an attempt to say, we already believe in limited government, we the founders. That's the brilliance of the miracle at Philadelphia, despite all the failures to live up to our ideals. But the 1787, 1788 conversation was to say, we believe in limited government because we believe in the limitless rights of people. And so they didn't have a Bill of Rights, but later when they started spelling it out, it's sort of like they got jazzed up trying to work this out for the American people. This is amazing stuff. And so I'm just wanting to hear you reflect a little bit on the glories of the First Amendment, even though it wasn't needed as a part of the structure at the beginning. Once they added it, why 5 of them in the same amendment?
I don't understand what he's saying there at all. but it has nothing and no reflection on the reality of knowing God. None of it. See, this is government void of any common sense or a foundation of wisdom. That's the problem. The founding fathers, I do believe, had that wisdom. And I do believe that the reason they chose those 5 things to put in the First Amendment is because they understood, because they were living under a tyrant, they understood what would happen or how a tyrant would in effect remove freedom from you, because an individual under tyranny is not free. It doesn't matter if they're a cool tyrant, you're still going to be held under a standard of living or occupation that keeps you from being a free individual, which keeps you from knowing the reality of God, which ultimately keeps you from understanding the life after this life. That's what it's all about. Let's hear what she had to say.
I don't know why, actually, as a historical matter, those were grouped. I'm sure there's a story that I don't know there about why those appeared in the First Amendment altogether rather than being split up in different amendments. I mean, assembly and protest and speech bear more relation to one another than necessarily free exercise, say. But I think, they are in the First Amendment, and I think that reflects that those were core values, that reflects that the states who ratified the Constitution, the original Constitution, on the understanding that a Bill of Rights would be added, wanted protections like that to be included because they were really core to what the new Americans thought was going to be America.
Thank you. I agree with you, and I think that some of why it's so useful to think.
All right, whatever, Ben Sassy. That guy drives me nuts. But do you see now that you have played both of those individuals, you see now that this is more of the same. And it doesn't matter if it's Democrat or Republican up there. I would say that the majority of people in government, unfortunately, do not understand the reality of what our founding fathers saw and why they built the Constitution the way that they did. Now, I want you to think about this, okay? As you walk around today, I want this rolling around in your head. As they talked about in Amy Coney Barrett's confirmation hearing, the founding fathers put 5 things in the First Amendment, the very First Amendment in the Constitution: freedom of speech, freedom of the press or dissemination of what you believe, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, and freedom to protest. Why did they choose those 5 things? Because they knew that tyrants, because they lived under a tyrant, would go after those things in order to reduce or eliminate your ability to be free. And why is freedom so important? Because that's what allows you to have a true relationship with God. I'm Jonathan Gilliam. This is The Experts. The truth has arrived. Go out and be free.